Welcome to today's Freud Museum Sigmund Shorts. I'm Anne Worthington. I'm a psychoanalyst practicing in South London, and I'm also a trustee of the Freud Museum. Now, while at an event at the Freud Museum a few months ago, I was surprised to overhear someone saying that the problem is that nobody today thinks that Freud has any relevance to clinical practice. Turning around, I was even more surprised to realise that this assertion came from a colleague, another analyst. Now, it's certainly true that psychoanalysis has grown and developed, and we've gained a wider range of ways of thinking about human subjectivity and suffering, about sexuality and about the unconscious. And it's certainly true that there are many contradictions and unresolved problems in Freud's work. Indeed, this was something he frequently acknowledged, along with his expectation that there would, of course, be developments of his radical theories. Nevertheless, I had thought that all psychoanalytic practitioners subscribed to Freud's fundamental postulates. But the startling comment got me thinking, not so much about the reformulations of Freud's work that have come to make clinical sense to me, nor about the challenges to psychoanalysis from cultural and social changes, not only those from queer theory, but from feminism, anti-imperialism, and countless others. But what about the day-to-day practicalities of the clinic? Is Freud's advice to newbie practitioners, published between 1911 and 1919 in the so-called technical papers, are they still of relevance today? Now, Strachey points out in his introduction to these papers in the standard edition that Freud was most reluctant to publish any rules or advice as to how to practice. He was highly skeptical, Strachey writes, as to the value to beginners of what might be described as aids to young analysts. You can't learn to be an analyst from a book, but as Freud insists, not only from clinical experience with patients, but most of all, of paramount importance is one's own analysis. Now, I didn't begin my own analysis with a view to becoming an analyst. I went because I was in trouble and I was unhappy. Nevertheless, I became caught up with it, an effect of transference, and then went on to train and undertake yet another analysis. The training of psychoanalysts has become more formalized since Freud's times, and the contemporary history of psychoanalysis in the UK is characterized by attempts to come to some agreement amongst us all on standards, both of education and training, and of ethical standards and of rules. Those rules include Freud's recommendation: candidates in training in the UK must undertake a personal analysis. Now, on beginning the treatment of 1913, Freud says he's making recommendations and not making rules because, he writes, the extraordinary diversity of the psychical constellations concerned, the plasticity of all mental processes, and the wealth of determining factors oppose any mechanization of technique. And they bring about a course of action that is, as a rule, justified, may at times prove ineffective, whilst one that is usually mistaken may once in a while lead to the desired outcome. This is certainly true of my own experience. I don't practice, I don't do the same things, speak in the same way with everyone who comes to speak to me. With each person, I need to find a way of listening and a way of speaking. I need to find a place to occupy that can support the patient to speak and to hear themselves speak, to hear what they've said and what they are saying. The papers on technique cover a great number of important subjects: dream interpretation, transference, free association, resistance, abstinence, neutrality, and working through. All really worthy of some considered exploration in the contemporary context. But in the one in Beginning on the Treatment, the paper on beginning the treatment, Freud has a lot to say about money, the doctor's fee, which seems still today very pertinent both to new practitioners and those with established practices, and not least very important for the analysand. On the side of the analyst, he advises that the ethical position that should be taken is one in which she acknowledges the value she places on her time and method of treatment. He goes on to write that money matters are treated in the same way as sexual matters, with the same inconsistency, prudishness, and hypocrisy. And the analyst should treat money matters with the same matter-of-course frankness that she does when talking about sexual life. On a practical note, he says, you should also never allow the patient to get into large debt to you. The fee should be asked for on fairly short, regular intervals. On the side of the analysand, on the other hand, he says that for the middle classes, psychoanalysis is a really good bargain, as it's much cheaper than the costs of a nursing home. And if the analysis is successful, the analysand will increase his earning capacity. He says, nothing in life is so expensive as illness and stupidity. Now, for Freud, the fee is a vehicle for transference and resistance, and he gives a lot of examples in this paper. The fee, he writes, has a regulatory effect, and it supports the treatment insofar as it provides a motivation for the analysand to conclude. The notion that money is symbolic beyond its monetary value, of course, is not a new one. The importance of the fee is that it evokes in the analysand the experience of loss, or of castration, as Freud would have it. The fee serves to demonstrate that something has to be given up and that there are prices to be paid that are not only monetary. Freud is frank about his need to make money, here and in other writings. In a letter to his colleague Jung in 1909, he says to him, just give up wanting to cure, learn and make money. Those are the most plausible conscious aims. What I like about this advice is not so much the aim of let's make money, but the caution about ambitious aims for the treatment. However, today, very few analysts rely solely on their clinical practice for income. Many of us have second jobs and other sources of income. When we set the fee, the unconscious aim is not to make money, rather to establish something of a transference and to learn something. Learn something perhaps about the patient's history, their object relations, etc., that will inform our assessment and the way we're going to conduct the treatment. How someone deals with money is often very revealing. But this is not to say that the analyst is somehow situated outside of the realm of money. of money, of exchange, of a contract, or indeed obligation, like a priest or a nun. We're not like this, and nor are we like the NHS. We need to be cognizant of the financial circumstances of those who come to talk to us. And we also need to be very alert to the particular significance money will have for each person, and how the way we're managing the fee will be interpreted. Now, there's a very lovely account of the fee and of transference love in Barbara Taylor's account of her analysis with someone she calls V in her fabulous published history called The Last Asylum, which came out in 2014. Barbara Taylor's analyst, Dr. V, sets his fee at a higher rate than she wants to pay. She tells him, "I spend too much money on things." "What sort of things?" he asks. "I don't know, meals out, clothes." Dr. V replies, "You need food and clothes, but you work. You should have enough money for what you need." Barbara Taylor doesn't know why she's so disconcerted by his comment. Later in her treatment, she was attending twice a week, and Dr. V was pressing her, she writes, to increase the frequency, to come more often to her sessions. So attending daily, psychoanalysis took over her life, and she had no money. She asked him, "Will you go on seeing me, even if I don't have the money to pay you?" There was a long pause. Dr. V replies, yes, I will, but I shall expect you to pay whatever you can afford." Barbara says, "I thought you might stop." "We've gone too far from that," says Dr. V. Barbara Taylor writes, "Suddenly an astonishing thought occurs to me. He wants to analyze me." She writes, "I dance away from this session. He loves me, he loves me." And then her response is swiftly followed by contempt. "The stupid fool." And then terror. "How will I ever get free of him now?" Now, many people who come to consult a shrink are very surprised to be told that they'll be charged for missed sessions. From whatever modality, whatever type of analyst you're seeing, the payment for missed sessions is often thought to support the work. And it's with this idea that a practitioner who was charging his patients, whose considerable difficulties resulted in that person hardly ever keeping the appointment, although they always phoned to explain and always paid the agreed fee. When the pandemic arrived and we were all in lockdown, the analyst was aware that the patient was without work and felt very concerned about continuing to charge the usual session for the usual fee for these missed sessions. Although this was something the patient had never questioned. So the analyst volunteered a fee reduction, but also hoping to encourage the patient to attend, telling the patient, "I'm not going to charge you so much, particularly as you're not coming to see me." And from then on, he never heard from the patient again. What might have happened? There's a reproach in those words, but could the fee reduction have been heard as a concession, as a gift or a present that by its very nature entails an obligation on the part of the recipient? In my house, every Christmas card received is greeted with "oh no," as we try to find one and a stamp in order to send back the good wishes. It's such a burden. So while Freud, as we have seen, recommended regular invoicing, not so much, so that not so much debt is allowed to build up, the payment of the fee at every session frees the patient of their obligations. The debt no longer ties you to the analyst. If you pay after each session, unlike Barbara Taylor, you know how you will be free of them now.